Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today we're actually going to use the GPS. We're going to do a short, or relatively short, little VFR flight plan. We're going to talk basic use of the GPS. So, what I mean by that is we're going to talk about getting established on course, tracking a course, both on course and offset from the course. And I want to stress using the GPS in this way, especially for VFR flying. Don't rely on the GPS. I see too many people relying on that pretty magenta line to get them places. You shouldn't do that. You should never use the GPS as a crutch because you can't navigate somewhere by other means. It should only be used to complement your VORs, NDBs, and regular pilotage navigation and dead reckoning. Now, you can rely on it for IFR, but that's a different story altogether. We're going to be using the GPS today, and although we are going to be using the GPS 500 panel-mounted GPS, these skills should work over to the GPS 295 handheld GPS just fine. Just remember, with handheld GPSs, you cannot use them for IFR flying. If your aircraft is using a handheld GPS, it is a slant alpha or a slant uniform, not a slant golf. Alright, so we're here in the default Mooney Bravo. I've had the FBO fill the tanks up and get the passengers on board and all that, so we are ready to go. Today's flight plan, I'm just going to, actually, we'll go ahead and start the engine. I'll just Control E to start the engine today. Alright. Not trying to be too legit here. So, the flight plan today takes us from Craig Municipal Airport here in Jacksonville, Florida. And we're going all the way down to New Smyrna Beach Airport, just south of Orlando, New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And you can see we got 3 waypoints programmed, 3 visual waypoints, VP AFI, VP Beck, and VP CJ. Now, we're going to be getting established on course as our first step, and tracking the course is going to be the next step, and we're going to discuss tracking both on and off the course. I specifically chose this route and these waypoints for this lesson, so this will be a good flight for us. Now, we're going to be using the GPS to navigate, and I'm going to be discussing using it to complement your regular navigation of looking out the window for VFR flying. Real quick, let's go ahead and turn on our beacon light, since that's going to be needed. Now, before we get airborne, we need to discuss this switch right here. This switch is labeled nav on one side and GPS on the other, and it's a 2-position switch. It's connected to the CDI here, and as you can see, flipping it changes some notations on the CDI. That is your CDI nav source select switch, also referred to as the couple switch sometimes. And what it does is it couples the GPS to your nav1 CDI, allowing the nav1 CDI to show where you are relative to your GPS course, instead of being driven by a VOR like it would be normally when that is in the nav position. So nav position means that the VOR radio number 1 is driving CDI number 1. GPS position means it's being driven via the GPS, and this CDI here will match the one on the GPS. That's what that one means. I'm going to go ahead and turn that message feature off since it's pretty much useless. So let's use the GPS to get everything set up prior to our departure. Now, I have the charts on my iPad here, and I will be using them to help me find waypoints to talk without having to reference SkyVector in my browser. But I'm going to use the GPS to show you how to set up the aircraft for departure. Let's go ahead and switch to the facility info page. We can see that, confirm that it is set for our departure airport first. And right now we are interested in radio frequencies. So real quick, I'm going to quickly set the ground control frequency on my COM1. The way I can do that quickly is by pushing the cursor and highlighting the frequency I want, in this case ground, and then hitting enter. Watch what happens to the COM1 standby when I hit enter. It changes. By doing that trick right there, you can quickly set any frequency in the GPS by highlighting it. And that will send it to either your COM1 or NAV1 standby. Not to the COM NAV2, but only the COM NAV1. So quick way to set frequencies there. Let's repeat that by switching that over so that COM 1 is on ground. And let's repeat that with tower. So you can see I've highlighted the tower frequency, 132.1, hit enter, and that is set for us. Now we have both ground and tower set, ready to go. And real quick, we need to know ATIS is on 125.4. I'll put that on COM 2, which means I have to set that manually. So real quick, we'll set that, 125.4. That is set, ready to go. Next, I want to listen to the departure ATIS and hear what's going on. So I'm going to tune them real quick. Note that I have selected the airport runway page.
Correct airport information, Lima 2011 Zulu, wind 126 at 9er, visibility 15, sky condition, ceiling 10,000, broken, temperature 282.17, altimeter 2988, visual runway 14 in use, landing and departing runway 14, VFR aircraft.
Okay, note they said winds were 126 at 8. Now, if it wasn't an ATIS and gave me the active runway, I could infer that the active runway was 14 simply by looking at this page. All I have to do is visualize where 126 is. Keep in mind this is a north-up page, so your cardinal directions are 360 here, 090 here, 180 here, and 270 here, which would mean 126 would be right around here somewhere, and you can see that definitely favors runway 14. The wind would be blowing this way, indicating runway 14 would be the one we would use. So that's a good way to quickly figure out a runway to use. Next, I want to know what my course is. I could look at the flight plan page here and see the desired track initially is 154, but that's indicated right here. However, we're not going to be using that. Note the magenta line sort of offsets. The first thing I want to talk about is getting established on course during the departure phase. So I'm actually going to be ignoring the magenta line at first. I want to know what the course to fly after that first waypoint is, because the first waypoint is close enough that I can basically head straight to it no matter what. And probably what we're going to do is discuss getting on course via the course to steer function or the bearing function to head straight to your first waypoint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set my CDI course to be the course after VP AFY, which would be the course to VBEC, which would be 172 degrees. Remember, this indicates the course to fly to this waypoint from the previous one. So we'll set 172 degrees on here. Right there. Now, as far as gauges are set up, we are almost ready to go. I'm going to need to tune the St. Augustine VOR because that VOR is going to be important for me to help locate these waypoints. It's not vitally important, I just want to have its DME available. So I'm going to set that on my nav 1 or nav 2. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and set it on nav 1. To look up the frequency, I'll just bring up the information page. Or I could go to the nearest page, see the St. Augustine VOR. I know its identifier is SGJ, it's nearby. I'll select that on the nearest, hit enter, sends that to my info page. And then just to show you I can send this to nav 1, cursor, highlight the frequency, hit enter, boom, 109.4 is sent to nav 1. Now, I'm too far away and on the ground, so I can't actually pick up St. Augustine yet, but once I get airborne, we should pick it up no problem. I'll go ahead and set 109.4 on here. Actually, no. I'm going to set Ormond Beach VOR here. 112.6. That's the VOR closest to our destination airport. And this is a short enough flight that we can get away with going ahead and setting it here while we're on the ground. So 122 or 112.6 is in nav 2. We're definitely too far away to pick this VOR up, but once we get airborne, it is a high altitude VOR, so we should pick it up prior to St. Augustine. And note it has a variation of 0, indicating the scenery for that area is fracked up. Thank you, Aerosoft, for not doing it right. So we are ready to go now, as far as our departure is concerned. Alright, so real quick, I'm going to bring up my airport diagram. We've already listened to ATIS, And we know runway 14 is active. I cannot remember the information identifier they used, but that's fine. We're using default ATC anyway. And we are here at the Sky Harbor FBO just off of Bravo. So we've already tuned ground, so it's automatically going to assume we want. No need to use the auto tune feature with the GPS or the ATC window. We're departing VFR to the south.
Greg, ground, Mooney, November 123, Mike Sierra with Mike. Request taxi to the active south departure. Mooney, November 123, Mike Sierra, taxi 2 and hold short of runway 14 using taxiway Bravo 5, Bravo Alpha. Contact tower 132.1 when ready. Taxiing hold short runway 14 via taxiway Bravo 5, Bravo Alpha.
Alright, they wanted to go to runway 14 via Bravo 5, which is that taxiway right there. Then Bravo, then Alpha, which is over there. Now, problem is going to be that aircraft right there. He's parked a little close to that line, so we may have to. Tell you what, we will turn around right here. Just watch this aircraft. We're clear right here. There's no airplane parked here, so we'll just turn around right here. Instead of getting on that taxiway line there and being a little close to that airplane. I want to hit him. Alright, I have the airport diagram up, so there's no need to use progressive taxi. Alright, we're cleared past the line. We are on Bravo 5. We're clear on the right and left. Alright, we've completed our run-up and we are ready to go. Just a final check. Make sure this is set and matches compass. And it's set to GPS. Our radios are set. We'll go ahead and put that on tower. We are going to use 121.5, the guard frequency. I'm not going to be using flight following with default ATC today until we get down towards Daytona when we have to go through the Charlie. So everything is set, ready to go. Rudder trim's not needed on this airplane. Alrighty. So we are on tower. We just got to get close enough to the runway for them to see what we're ready to take off. Alright. Doesn't look like anyone's coming in to land, and nobody's on the runway.
Greg, tower, Mooney, November 123, Mike Sierra, runway 14, ready for takeoff. Departure to the south. Mooney, November 123, Mike Sierra, cleared for takeoff. Runway 14, departure to the south. Approved.
Alright.
Cleared for takeoff. Runway 14.
Now, VFR departure, we can pretty much go out on runway heading since we are heading to the south, and runway 14 faces roughly to the south. Rotate. Whoa! The hell, where'd that come from? Alright, we got positive rate and clear gear up. Wow, this plane really needs some nose up trim. Jesus, I hadn't flown the default Mooney in forever. Alright, we'll just fly runway heading outbound for now. Those clouds are based at roughly 8,000, I believe, so if we stick to 5,500, we should be clear of them. And they should be fine as long as we go along the coast. Alright, so we don't want to look at the GPS right now. We're still close to the airport and we're still below the traffic pattern. I don't want to worry about anything until we get 2,000 feet, which would be 1,000 feet above the traffic pattern for normal planes and 500 feet above the traffic pattern for complex planes. So right now, don't worry about the GPS, don't worry about getting on course, just fly the plane, look out for traffic. Knowing what your course is prior to takeoff will allow you to get on course quicker without having to worry about the GPS, by the way. I know my course is aligned here, but I just want to fly off on runway heading because I just want to do it differently. Right, there's 1,500 feet. That's the traffic pattern altitude for complex aircraft like twin engines. Let's go ahead and bring the throttle back. Manifold pressure at 35. And we'll bring RPM back to 25 to get us in a steady climb. And we'll pitch for, we'll say 700 feet per minute. Alright, there's 2,000 feet. We can go ahead and bring up the GPS, and you can see.
Mike 0, you are leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
All right, we're clear of their airspace. I'm going to go ahead and switch to guard so we don't hear anybody. All right, and you can see we are definitely off course now. Right now, I want to get on my flight plan course. That doesn't necessarily mean I want to get on that magenta line, however. Note that my flight plan course starting at VFR is pretty much south. I have two options here. Since VFR is close by, I can either navigate directly to it, and that would probably be the most efficient thing, is just head direct to that first waypoint instead of worrying about getting on my magenta line. Since that waypoint is pretty close to me already, and I know I'm not going to hit anything at this altitude, so I'm pretty safe to be off course, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, how do I go direct VFR? Well, my sidebar tells me. Bearing is 165, so I'm going to set my heading to 165. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my track here on the GPS match my track bearing here. There's one. Okay, we oversteered it. Let's correct back to the left. Just a little bit. Right there. Alright, go wings level here. And we're on roughly 166 now, and that's the bearing direct to the first waypoint. So if we fly this heading, 166, we'll stay there. I'm going to use the autopilot today to make my life a little easier. So we're going to go ahead and set autopilot heading and altitude, and it will climb us and fly us on this heading. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the 2D cockpit as well. And we're going to put the GPS right over here in this corner. Make my life a little easier. Let's go ahead and bring out the mixture. And we're well away from the airport now, so we can switch off the landing light. And we'll turn flight director on, why not? So, by making my track here match my bearing here, I can navigate directly to my first waypoint without having to worry about getting on my magenta line. This is the more efficient route since the GPS waypoint is close by. Now, if I did need to get on that magenta line for, say, terrain clearance or something like that, then I would need to take the most efficient heading to get onto that magenta line. In that case, I look at this number here. Course to steer 182. From my present position, flying a heading of 182 degrees would get me on that magenta line on the most efficient route. Alright, so we're climbing up to 5,500 and we are en route at this point, heading to the first waypoint. Now remember I said I want you to use the GPS to complement your other forms of navigation, especially when flying VFR. Now, it's okay to rely on this GPS when you're IFR because it is, well, you're IFR and this is set to the high standards for IFR flying. And if you're flying RNAV procedures, you really have no choice but to rely on it. But VFR flying, you should never rely on the pretty magenta line to get you somewhere. I chose this flight plan and I chose these waypoints because I know how to identify them other than using the GPS. Now we know Victor Papa at AFI here is on our GPS. We know its exact position. We can see it on our charts as well. This is a visual waypoint. It's relative to a point on the ground that we can see. In this case, Victor or VPAF, VATFI, I'm going to call it VATFI. We can identify VATFI via the Palm Valley Bridge just to the north of it, and it's also going to be 10 DME north of the St. Augustine VOR. So if I go to an outside view real quick, we're close enough that we should be able to find the Palm Valley Bridge, and right there it is. So right there is Palm Valley. That's the Palm Valley Bridge. Our waypoint is just to the south of it, and it can also be identified as 10 nautical miles north of the St. Augustine VOR, which is located on the St. Augustine airfield right there. Now, as you can see, we are getting pretty much on course with VATFI right now. We're pretty much right over it. So now's the time to fill in our nav log. We are hitting VATFI. I'm going to go ahead and activate the next leg manually. The GPS will do it for you automatically when you have waypoint sequencing on. There goes plan G ding, and then I'm passing over it. I'm going to set autopilot nav hold on. Now the autopilot is now going to maintain a navigation course from the CDI number 1 with nav holds on. Nav hold on the autopilot maintains the course set inbound on the CDI number 1. In this case, CDI number 1 is being driven by the GPS by that switch over here. So basically, now the autopilot is going to maintain this course. Now the autopilot is flying wings level, and you can see it's flying a track of 174. The desired track is 172, so let's give it a minute for the autopilot to get en route. It's trying to get this aligned perfectly. And we are just south of 10 DME now, so that was VATFI we passed back there. Alright, now that the GPS has captured the course and is pretty much right on top of it, you can see the desired track is roughly matching the actual track now. So once the GPS gets this centered, it's going to have these two numbers match. Now, once we are established on course and heading to this waypoint, these three numbers here will match. 172, 172, 172. That means we're heading straight to the waypoint along our current course. And you should also notice that these here should be close to 0. Track angle error and angle off should all be 0, or close to it. Apparently we're only 0.4 nautical miles off course to the left. Now here we can see the estimated time of arrival at 16:41 local. It's currently 35, and 6 minutes out means we'll arrive at 16:41 local. There's the clock right there, by the way. Now, although I do have the autopilot flying the plane right now, that should give you a pretty good indication of what you're supposed to do to keep your course set. Now, we're relatively en route right now. So when you're flying en route and you're below 18,000 feet, you have to keep tuning local weather stations to get the surface altimeter setting so that you always fly the right altitude. Remember, your altimeter will change as you go. Now, I didn't do too much of a good weather briefing prior, so I don't know how much the altimeter is changing along this route. But we need to tune. We're far enough away from Craig now that we need to tune a nearby station to find out. Now, not all airports have a weather station on them. this case St. Augustine does, and I can look at my chart and see exactly where weather stations are. St. Augustine's the closest. There's also Palatka, Larkin not too far away, and Ormond Beach we're probably close enough to pick up as well. Let's actually tune Palatka, Larkin. In real life you'd want to tune St. Augustine since you're right over it, but let's tune Palatka, Larkin, which is about 20 nautical miles away from here. Let's just pretend that St. Augustine wasn't there and this course was far enough away from weather stations that we had to use one that was a little further away. Alright, so I need to know what Palatka Larkin's radio frequency is. I can get that from the chart. It's ASOS is on 119.902, but let's use the GPS. So we'll select Palatka Larkin in this airport info here. Its identifier is 28 Juliet, Palatka Larkin Airfield, or Larkin Airfield in Palatka, Florida. And that's its position, 49 feet. As you can see, there, look, that's what it looks like. And it does not appear to have an ASOS in-flight simulator. So we have to use St. Augustine. Alright, so that tells me that that airport does not have an ASOS in-flight sim, which probably means it didn't have one back in 2006 when the nav data was compiled, but although it does have one now. So why did I do that? Let's go ahead and tune St. Augustine. Their ATIS is on 119.63. Let's put that in COM2. 119.63. And listen in.
St. Augustine Airport Information Hotel. 2037 shallow. Wind 126 at 9er. Visibility 17. Sky condition ceiling 10,000. Broken. Temperature 28. Dew point 17. Altimeter 2988. Visual runway 13 in use. Landing and departing runway.
Alright, 2988, our altimeter was pretty much set correctly. And remember, you can do that with any facility whilst en route. Just all you need to know is its identifier, which you can usually get from the chart if you don't know it already. Now, the next frequency I'm going to need as far as ATIS is concerned is New Smyrna Beach's ATIS, and I'm just, well, I was going to use the chart. Let's go ahead and use the GPS so you can see exactly what that looks like. I type in the identifier and hit enter. There's New Smyrna Beach in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. There's its position, its elevation. Its lowest minimums are RNAV. It has avgas and jet fuel available. There's its map. And its ATIS is on 124.63. We'll go ahead and set that. 124.63. We'll have that set in the COM2 active. That's the next frequency I'm going to need. Alright, we're 2 minutes out from our next waypoint. Now, this waypoint here, I want to show you something. See how it sort of doglegs out to the water a little bit? I want to stick over the land as much as possible. But I still want to be able to follow my course. Now, come on. My chart program sort of messed up here. VP Beck can be identified as the Crescent Bridge, which is directly below it. And that would be it right there. That's the Crescent Bridge right there. Which means VP Beck is right over that. I'm going to actually put the aircraft in heading hold mode again. Now, with heading hold aligned prior to putting in the heading hold, I already set the heading bug to straight down this course, so we're going to hit this waypoint either way. First, I'm going to turn off the waypoint sequencing so you can see what happens. Listen for the ding from Plan G if you can hear it. That's about the time that the GPS will sequence to the next waypoint. There's the ding. The GPS should be sequencing to the next waypoint right about now, but you can see it hasn't. We are directly over the waypoint now, and it hasn't sequenced to the next one. That's because I turned off automatic waypoint sequencing. If I switch it back on real quick, and it auto-sequenced to the next one. Now I'm going to continue flying this heading. We'll set our new course 160. I'm going to show you a trick. Let's say I wanted to navigate over the land as much as possible. I didn't want to follow this dog leg and take me out to the ocean. I want to stay over land. I want to set a offset for this course, but I still want to follow along that course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use heading select on the autopilot, and you can do this flying hand as well. I'm just going to maintain this heading until the CDI shows me 1 nautical mile off course. Remember, that first square there is 1 nautical mile off course. Second one is 2 nautical miles. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the desired track match my actual track. And when those two match, you are flying along your course. But if I am off of my course, but still flying along it, I am flying parallel with that course. So this is a good way to use the default GPS to fly offset of the course. And that's actually a recommended way to do it with a flight plan like this. Notice these VP waypoints. These are visual waypoints. These are pre-positioned waypoints for VFR flying that you can file in a flight plan. ATC knows where they're at. It's mostly used for VFR flying because they can be identified by a point on the ground, but this makes them very, very popular waypoints. We're not the only airplane in the world that's going to be smart enough to use them. So, it's recommended, and you can actually find this in the airport facility directory where they list all the visual waypoints and their coordinates, as well as what you can use to identify them. They actually put a notation there that says GPS navigation not recommended because the GPS is so accurate it will fly you right along this course line, and if everyone is doing that, well, that increases the chances that you're going to hit each other. So, flying offset of your GPS course is recommended sometimes. And in real life, you can actually program an offset into a flight management system or a GPS, and it will automatically fly that offset. In Flight Sim, we don't have that luxury. We have to do it the hard way. But we can still do it. It just requires a little bit more work on our part. Okay, I am noticing that my track error indicates I am more than 1 nautical mile off course, so I guess that first square there is actually 2 nautical miles off course, and this one's 4. Interesting. So I'm just going to continue on this track, and you can see my CDI on my gauge here matches the CDI on my GPS. Alright, I'd say we're close enough to 2 nautical miles off course now, so let's go ahead and turn to parallel our course. Now again, how do we do that? How do we know how to parallel this course? Well, there's no need to guess and do math. The GPS tells us our desired track, i.e. the heading we would fly if we were along this magenta line, is 160. All we have to do is make our track here, the actual track, match the desired track. So let's turn to a heading of 160. Now keep in mind, heading is not the same as track, so we will have to adjust for wind. Notice that green arrow? That green arrow also points to the desired track of your GPS. So if a quick and easy way to align the two is just point that green arrow right at that arrow on the desired track there. And there we go. We are flying a track of 160 now. Close enough. We're at 161. I'd say that's close enough to 160 for government work. And you can see we are 2.2 nautical miles right of the course. but we are still flying along it. We are flying an offset. Now, the VPCJ waypoint can be found by, well, it is directly abeam the Ormond Beach Airport, and there is also a bridge named High Bridge to the south of it. I don't know if that's named High Bridge or it just is a high bridge. So that will be the two things we look for. We'll look for the Ormond Beach Airport, past 90 degrees off of it. Well, there's the Ormond Beach Airport. No, that's not. That's the Flagler County Airport. That's not Ormond Beach, that's Flagler County. Okay. Pretty much at the waypoint now. That's the airport we need to pass abeam, which is the Flagler County Airport, not the Ormond Beach Airport. Sorry. And, oh look, there's the high bridge right there. That is a high bridge. Is that the high bridge they're referencing? It should have a major road going to it. I'm looking at my chart, by the way. A major road going to it over the intercoastal and just south of the airport. Yep. So we are over that waypoint now. And look at here, the GPS did not sequence. So the GPS is not going to sequence your course when you're flying an offset. That's a thing you need to be aware of. You have to manually sequence your waypoints when flying an offset. So our new track is 170. Let's just make those two match. So keep this trick in mind. You do not always have to fly along the magenta line. In fact, I actually highly recommend not trying to fly along the magenta line. It's alright to have the magenta line set as a reference, but I often have it set as a way to say I don't want to be south of this magenta line. So it's set on the GPS as a reference, but I want to stick either north or south, or I just want to stick off of that line for some reason. And that is usually used to keep me clear of airspace. What the hell? We had a weather change. Alright, now we're flying along, having a good old time. All of a sudden, our passenger's getting sick. They're back there, they're puking, they're dying. We need to divert. We have a medical emergency, we need to get on the ground now. And any airport will work. Let's go for an airport with services so we know someone's there. And let's say I was a bad virtual pilot and I didn't have any charts ready to go. I only had the information brought up for my departure and destination airport. I'm actually going to put my iPad away here so I can't cheat. So the only way I have of accessing information for this airport is via the map, which would pause the sim, and I don't want to do that. I can use the GPS. So right away we know we need to divert to an airport that has services. That's going to be an airport with a hard runway and a control tower. So let's go ahead and hit the nearest function and switch it over back to airports. Right away we can see all the nearby airports. We have Flagler County nearby. It's a hard surface, has a CTAF, no approaches. Here's Ormond Beach. This will probably be our best bet. We can see that it has a tower, it's a hard surface runway, and it's a VOR approach, so there's probably going to be an attendant at that airfield. We can see we are very close to it now. I'm going to turn off the autopilot. I can already see the airport at my 12 o'clock. I'm going to pull the throttle back, and I'm going to start down now. My passenger's in the back, and he is dying. Right away, I need to bring up its information because I don't have any of the charts on me. So I'm going to highlight it, hit enter, and that'll send an info page to me. I can see it is 29 feet with avgas and a VOR approach. I'm close enough that I don't have time to look up the ATIS info for it. But I do want to call their tower right now. So real quick, I'm going to send their tower to COM 1. And I'm going to select them on the frequency page. I'm going to request an immediate full stop landing.
Ormond Beach Tower, Moody, November 123 Mike Sierra, is 4 miles northwest Gulf, select. Moody, November 123 Mike Sierra, Ormond Beach Tower, flight left traffic, runway 8, altimeter.
Alright, runway 8 is in use. I'm going to set CDI to runway 8. They told us to fly left traffic.
Slide left downwind, runway 8.
Okay, so my CDI is set to the runway. I'm bringing the throttle out as much as possible.
Hyper green uniform, contact ground on 121.625.
Now, in real life, if you don't have time to tune the ATIS and you don't tell the controller you have the ATIS, he will make you aware of the local altimeter pressure. However, in Flight Sim, they did not model that feature with ATC. The controller did not make me aware of the local altimeter setting because default ATC assumes that you listen to the ATIS. I didn't have time to listen to the ATIS. I'm in a hurry, so I'm going to real quick. I'm just going to hit B to align my pressure. I could listen to the ATIS now if I wanted, but we're in a hurry. I'm doing this spiral, by the way, to get down quickly. Close to the airport. And if you didn't figure out, this is me showing you how to divert off of your flight plan. Now, since I was pretty close to Ormond Beach when I decided to divert, I didn't have to use the direct to function. I'll talk about that once we get on the ground, though, how to use the direct to function. Alright, I don't know the traffic pattern altitude at Ormond Beach, but I can guess it by just looking at the info page and see its elevation is 29 feet. That's close enough to sea level. We can just assume traffic pattern altitude is 1,000 feet. Now, we were told to fly the left traffic runway 8. I've set runway 8 heading on my CDI, and let's go ahead and enter that pattern. Alrighty.
Moody, November 123, Mike Sierra, wind 126 at 9er, clear to land runway 8.
Clear to land runway 8.
Clear to land runway 8. Moody 3, Mike Sierra.
Alright, starting down, gear down. Go ahead and turn onto the base leg. Alright, first notch of flaps. Last notch of flaps. This aircraft only has 2 flap settings, approach and landing. Alright, and like a bad pilot, I don't have charts for this airfield because all I looked up was my departure and destination. But we had a problem and had to divert, and now we're completely unprepared for it. But we were able to get the tower frequency and all that fun stuff from the GPS. Our tower will give us the ground frequency as we exit the runway. And ground can direct us to parking. So you're never alone, even at a completely unfamiliar airfield. Especially if it has a control tower. flaps up. Landing and strobe lights are off. I flipped them on, by the way, with this external switch.
121.625. 121.625. 43 Mike Sierra.
Alright. Now on grounds frequency real quick. And we'll clear the runway. Alright, now I don't have a chart for this airfield. I don't know where the parking is, so I'm just going to use default ATC. I want to go to, it really doesn't matter, but let's go to parking.
Ormond Beach ground, Mooney, November 123 Mike Sierra. Request taxi to parking. Mooney, November 123 Mike Sierra. Taxi to general aviation parking via taxiway Alpha Charlie Romeo Alpha Mike Papa. Taxiing to general aviation parking using taxiway Alpha.
And again, don't know this airfield, so I'm going to use progressive taxi. And there's no shame with you using progressive taxi if you don't know the airfield, because you can request it in real life as well. It doesn't quite function this way, although I wish it did. Alright, so now that we're on the ground taxiing in, we'll park up and let's discuss diverting. Now, I was very close to Ormond Beach when I diverted. I pretty much already had it in sight, and that was a best case scenario. We'll talk a worst case scenario once we get parked up. I'll show you how to actually use the GPS to do what an actual divert is going to look like. Especially if you are some distance away from the airfield you're going to. So we're going to be parking right next to that Piper Archer right there. So in real life, we get our passenger out. The FBO would be calling the hospital, get an ambulance over here.
Clearance delivery, November 322 Foxtrot, Tibet. Ready to copy IFR clearance to Tamiami. November 322 Foxtrot, Tibet. Cleared to Tamiami Airport as filed. Fly runway heading, climb and maintain 7,000. Departure frequency is 125.8, squawk 4201. November 322 Foxtrot, Tibet. Cleared to Tamiami Airport as filed. Fly runway heading, climb and maintain 7,000. Departure on 125.8, squawk 4201. 92 Foxtrot, Tibet. Read back correct. Contact ground on 1.
Real quick, I'm going to set 123.45 here so that we don't have to worry about ATC getting in the way. So what will an actual divert look like? Well, let's say we were flying along our magenta line here, and let's say that there were no good airports to divert to as we were flying. Well, let's go ahead and we need to divert anyway, so let's go to the nearest page. And we can see, and this is not a good example due to my location, but let's say Daytona Beach International was our best case scenario for a divert. It's towered, it's a hard surface with an ILS. It's towered, it's a hard surface, it's got an ILS. Dollar to the donut, that would be the best place to divert if you had a problem. There will be services there, yada yada yada. You can get fuel, you can get help. So we have two ways of diverting. One, just simply looking at the nearest page, we can see its direct to bearing and distance, and we can just make that our course. So we'll note the direct to bearing is 166. If we go back to the default nav page, simply make your track 166 and that will get you there. That can be useful if you need to do a temporary divert. What is that Mooney doing? And you intend to take back off again and get back on your flight plan course, like I have done in a previous video. If you discovered, I'm low on fuel, let's land and refuel real quick and then get back en route. Instead of using the direct to feature, which will erase your flight plan, you can actually just use that feature of nearest, note its direct to heading, and make that your track, land, get there. And keep in mind, you can always look up airport information simply by entering its identifier or its name in this page here. The other way you can do it is go to the direct to function. If you have a specific airport in mind and it's not one that will show up on the nearest page, simply hit direct to, type in its identifier. Let's say I wanted to go let's say I wanted to go to Kissimmee. I wanted to divert to Kissimmee Airfield. I can simply type that in, Kissimmee Gateway, Orlando, Florida, and I can see, oh, the direct to course from my present position would be 202. There's no reason to activate this right now. I'll just clear it, make my track 202, and I'll get there eventually. That, again, can be used if you want to divert, land, but also want to take back off again and not have to reload your flight plan. And of course, if you do have to have that pretty magenta line, you can always just type it in, enter, boom. Now keep in mind that does erase your flight plan, but it is an option, and it will give you a track course. It will change all of this for you, so you will know exactly what your ETA is and exactly course to steer, bearing, and all that fun stuff, as opposed to the method I was showing where you just look up this info right here and don't activate it. Then all this is going to be set to your flight plan, not your divert, and you have to figure all this out by yourself. So that is a useful trick to have there. And that concludes this video, which is the basic use of the GPS. Next video we'll be discussing more advanced use of the GPS, including flying IFR and even SIDS and stars with it, even though you can't actually load them with the default GPS. So hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.